Can I start by asking about women and democracy? Before we get into the, or drill down on democracy, women and representation, political representation, is an issue that's been discussed a great deal in Australia. I want to come straight to the issue of why it matters. Does equal representation of men and women matter in our parliaments and matter in our cabinets?
Yeah, I think there are two reasons why it matters. I mean, one is simply that if we live in a society which is ordered by gender, which Australia is, Britain is, I mean, any society we know in the world in terms of the organisation of care work, the organisation of employment, the culture, gender is a kind of crucial feature that orders our lives. If you live in that kind of society, men and women broadly are going to have different kinds of preoccupations, concerns, perspectives that need to be represented in politics. And the idea that all of those could be represented either by an all-male legislature, which we've had in the past, or what we get at the moment, which is maybe legislatures where 1 in 4 politicians are women, that's a real problem. So that's the first thing, is just just ensuring that people's different concerns get a voice and get a representation in the political decisions. But I think there's also, and this is where a kind of 50-50 issue becomes really powerful, there's also the question of, I mean, democracy is supposed to be recognising us all as political equals. And what does it say about the nature of us as citizens if it seems incapable of delivering a system in which men and women alike are equally engaged in making the political decisions that affect our lives? So, I mean, I think, you know, the evidence that researchers come up with as to exactly what difference does it make, whether you have 10% women, 20% women, 30% women, even, and there are countries where it's 40 and 50% women, what difference does it make to policy? There's a lot of evidence about the differences that it does make, but it's not kind of overwhelming, right? And so skeptics sometimes say, well, you know, exactly what, does it really matter? It seems to me that even if you could find absolutely no evidence of it making a difference, there is a kind of basic question about citizenship and what equal citizenship means. And it doesn't just mean we have an equal right to vote. It's got surely to mean that we have equal participation in our political systems. So I think there are both those arguments. There's the interest argument, which is, you know, it's open, of course, to some kind of empirical testing about exactly what difference it makes when women are there.
Do you think it does make a difference, though, on exactly that?
Well,
I mean, do
yes.
women represent women's issues better than?
Yeah, I think on the issues that we think of as women's issues, it unquestionably makes a difference. So that so if you're thinking about questions like the increased emphasis on issues of equal pay, sex harassment, childcare issues, you know, the kinds of issues that we conventionally think of as women's issues. Of course, they should be everyone's issues, but, you know, those kinds of issues, there is no question that when you have an increased presence of women in decision-making bodies, these become much more items on the agenda.
Can it become a bit of a burden, though, for women who are elected into office because they are there representing their electorates and perhaps myriad issues of concern, and yet they're expected to also carry the banner for women and women's issues?
Yes, and I think lots of women in politics do find that quite troubling. Generally, the pressure on that eases when you get more women in politics. I think the pattern in which women politicians say, I am here as a representative of this party or that party, and the fact that I'm a woman is completely irrelevant, that tends to happen at a time when you have fewer women in politics. But when you move to larger proportions of women in politics, I think women find it much easier to say, I have a particular knowledge and expertise in this field which hasn't been addressed in our discussions so far, and I'm going to draw on that as well as all the other concerns that my constituents have. Half my constituents are women, after all.
How much gender diversity is necessary in our parliaments? Is a little bit okay?
there's a tendency to think that we're on the right trajectory. It's moving in the right direction. We can lament about how slow it is on certain occasions, but there's a kind of, people have a kind of confidence that it's moving in the right direction. Well, in most cases, when it is moving in the right direction, it's because there has been very extensive mobilization, often including forms of affirmative action, gender quotas and so on, in order to even arrive at that stage. So none of this happens naturally. There is no natural transition here. The changes occur because people have made them occur. I'm a strong supporter of gender quotas because I think that there is no natural progression without them. But that's not to say that in every country in the world they have been necessary. I mean, not all countries that have very high proportions of women in politics have needed gender quotas. There are other things that can produce the same effect. But generally, I think the evidence is pretty clear from around the world that the countries where there is a significant increase are countries where some form of affirmative action has been employed.